Welcome to Releasing Trauma, a Survivor's Podcast. I am your host, Tracy Osborne. I am a survivor of emotional bullying, rape, sexual assault, domestic abuse, and grief. After losing my husband in 2019, I set off on a new adventure to help other women release their trauma and create a life they can cherish. Each week, I will feature a guest expert or survivor to share their stories, tips, wisdom, and more. The goal is so that you can take away even just the smallest nugget of information you can use in your life right now to make a change, and to remind you that you're not alone. There is life after trauma, and you can move from victim to thriver and create a life you can cherish. Hi, everybody. Welcome to another show. I'm your host, Tracy Osborne. With me today is Linda Melanson. We are going to talk about our inner child. And I love talking about our inner child because she is such a huge part of us. And I was talking to a client the other day about her inner child. When she lets her inner child take over, how they tend to cause a lot of chaos and stuff. So we're going to talk about that today. We're going to talk about inner child work and trauma and all of that good stuff. So Linda, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me, Tracy. It's such a pleasure being on here with you.
Well, I'm thrilled to have you. And this is a great topic. I don't think we can talk about this one enough on the show, actually. But let's start with a little bit about your backstory. Tell us about you.
So I started on my journey 22 years ago. I was 19 years old and coming out of a very tumultuous type of childhood, to say the least. And then I opened up spiritually, and I was like, I never wanted to turn back, and I just wanted to stay on that path and continue growing and learning and helping others kind of figure themselves out. So I went to college in Edmonton, studied there for a year, and I studied all types of complementary healthcare, like traditional Chinese medicine, touch therapy, numerology, color therapy, and all different kinds of stuff like that. And then it still wasn't in alignment with my goals and what I was trying to achieve. So then I continued on. I graduated from nutrition, and then I graduated from aromatherapy and holistic aesthetics. And then in probably about 5 years ago, I got certified as a past life regressionist, a hypnotherapist. And then I went on to neurolinguistic programming. And then through that studying, I was working with somebody, and we cleared all of my emotions through most of, I can't say that. So hold on, let's back up here. My inner child work started 13 years ago. And I was actually stumbled across it accidentally. I had a friend of mine suggested I do the work, and then another friend of mine gave me the book from Bruce Lipton called Biology of Belief. And I'm not sure if you ever heard of that one, Tracy, but it's really like reading the both of them together simultaneously really opened up my eyes to a lot of the emotions that get laid in the core of your being. And those emotions tend to be the ones that we operate from. So we're talking like when we're in the womb, developing in the womb to 18 months. And this is probably one of the most profound parts of the inner child work that I've developed. And it's from like in the womb until 18 months where we really can discover a lot of the emotions that we have operating, because at that time we're directly connected to mom and dad and their emotional reactions to the outside world. And this is an evolutionary process to help us survive. It's what's kept us alive all these years, that we have these pre-programs that tell us when something is happening, you react this way. And so through that knowledge and doing that work early on for myself, it really did shift a lot for me in that at that time frame. And then, life took over, and I ended up having my daughter, and kind of took some time off in that field altogether, just so I could focus on her. And about 5 years ago, I was like, okay, it's time to get back at it. And that's when I became the past life regressionist and neurolinguistic programming. And then I started to put together emotional release course. And it wasn't quite hitting the root that I wanted to get to. And then the inner child work just kind of seemed to be born out of that.
Wow, that's quite a journey.
Mm-hmm.
Past life regression fascinates the heck out of me. And that's a story for another time, but there's a reason for it. And it has to do with the Ouija board, being 15, playing with the Ouija board. But that's a whole different show. So, so let's talk about our inner child. And, she forms, like you say, in the womb, deep within us. It's not just our childhood self, but it's more of a part of our soul, I think.
Absolutely. And this is one of the parts that I think that people don't realize is especially those core emotions that get laid in those early developmental stages. A lot of our life and everything that we're attracting to us as we start to grow into early childhood, like toddler, childhood, early teens, all of that is all based from those core emotions. Mm-hmm. And a lot of that stuff actually stems way back further. And we're looking at, past lives and your DNA line. And it all is correspondent to what the higher self, the spirit, wants to experience here. And so hardship is the best way for the mind to grow and learn. And it's unfortunate, but that is the way that this physical earthly experience works.
So, I've heard of this before where, before we're incarnated into this lifetime, we kind of choose our path. Not sure how much of that I truly believe, but I think part of it is true. I think we have some idea of what's going to happen to us in this lifetime and what lessons we need to learn. For me personally, it took me a long time to learn some of those lessons. I had to repeat them over and over again. What was that?
At lifelong lessons, right?
Oh my goodness, yes.
You learn them fast and easy. That's the thing.
Yeah, patterns that I've repeated and things like that. So tell us about our inner child and how trauma affects her.
Okay, so first of all, trauma, it engulfs so many different things. Like everybody thinks that, like in my experience, everybody I've come across, they think that trauma is something extreme that's happened to you along your path, right? That changes, the whole path. And that's not always necessarily true. Trauma can come by a simple phrase you heard somebody say about you that just got sunk right into the subconscious mind and just changed the way that you thought about yourself. You see, when we look at children and we can see children, they're so bright, they're so innocent, and they don't really know yet how dense and intense the world can be. And so these little tiny things can mean the world to a child and cause a lot of trauma. Just one simple phrase can change everything for a child.
I know this for a fact, even though I wasn't a child when I had it said to me, but I was 15, 16. So I was still developing. But my father, after not seeing me for a year, said, well, if I can't have the sexiest daughter on the block, I guess I'll have the shortest. Mind you, I wasn't overweight. I might have had a small pooch on my stomach, but that was about it. I was not overweight by any stretch of the imagination. But that started a lifetime of self-loathing. Just that
Absolutely.
Little sentence. And he was joking. He wasn't serious. But to me, that completely changed everything I thought about myself.
Yeah, because to you it was serious and it was true, and you took it like, even though he was joking at the time, to you that wasn't a joke.
Exactly.
And that's what I mean is trauma, these little things that change you from that higher thinking, that compassion, kind, everybody is innocent. And that's another thing too, is children, they're not able to, and until you're in your early 20s, you're not able to actually step outside of yourself and really understand where the other person is coming from. So a lot of times, like jokes and different stuff like that is taken very literally and very seriously until you're in your early 20s, and your brain isn't completely formed until you're 25 years old.
Right. Yeah. So, the things that we say to our children, those little jabs, they stick. They absolutely
They
stick.
stick. Is right. And that's the whole thing, is trauma literally is whatever takes you away from that higher thinking about yourself and the world around you. So what happens is we start to develop habits and patterns that are not in alignment with that higher self or that higher thinking, and therefore we start to attract and make choices to move towards these situations that will validate how we feel inside.
So how do we heal our inner child? She's wounded. We've come as far as we have, oftentimes with her at the helm, and it's time for us to take back control and heal her. Where do we
Yeah.
start?
So, my suggestion would be, if you're just wanting to do home study and you don't want to work with anybody, John Bradshaw, Homecoming, is a great book to start with. And also, I always recommend that you look into the Bruce Lipton Biology of Belief. I find those two together can really give you a mind shift of what's actually happening here, and right into the cell, right like understanding right at the cell level of your emotions and why you have these patterns. If you're interested in working with somebody, I have 4 levels of inner child work. So level 1 is we just do from the womb until 18 months. And like I had said before, those are core emotions. Like, you really find what's operating under the surface just in those that time frame. Then we go 18 months to 7 years old, so just after you start school. And then we go from 7 until 25, and then we're pretty much clearing anything that's been left over at that point. So they all have different working levels. But sometimes we only need to do one section, and that's why I have it in 3 sections, right?
That's interesting. So it's not just a matter of, just helping her to feel loved and safe and all of that. There's actually a lot deeper work involved.
Absolutely. You really, it depends on the intensity of the trauma that you've experienced, and the emotions that you have attached to it. You see, trauma to you may not be the same as trauma to me. We could go through the very exact same experiences, and you might take it one way, and I might take it a completely different, emotionally intense way. Right. So you can't say that, it's not a blanket. It's your emotional reaction to the experience is what matters the most, because that's where the teachings come. That's where you learn what you were meant to learn in the situation. But when we're so young, when you go from birth to 5 years old, we don't have a logical mind thinking. We're 100% emotionally learning the world. So by the time that the mind comes on board, it's just making up stories to validate all the emotions that have been built according to the world around the person at that point. And so a lot of times what we're doing is we're reopening those early days to allow the mind to truly see what took place.
Interesting.
And and allow the mind to connect to the emotions so that the mind is able to communicate with the emotion to understand and not just make up the story, right? That's where the ego comes in.
Okay. So how do we know which section to start at?
Well, most of the time you'll know, kind of have an idea of when trauma took place
When the
for
trauma
you.
took place. Okay.
But if you want to clear everything, I'd say start right at the beginning.
Okay.
It's always my recommendation to go right to the source.
Sure.
And once you go right to the source, you kind of heal, like you heal a bunch of early emotions that are operating that you don't need anymore. So once you do that, then when you move up from there, you're literally looking at these other stages with a whole different eye view.
Okay. So is there anything that you can tell us today that we can, any takeaways that we can have today to kind of help us along this journey, and help us to decide whether or not this is something we want to do ourselves or, with somebody else. But, yeah, I just totally lost my train of thought on that one. It's one of those days. My allergies are kicking in, so my mind isn't all there today for some reason. But no, some takeaways that the listeners can have today, so that they can decide, okay, well, yeah, I really should start with, from birth to 5 years old with Linda, or maybe I'll work on it on my own, and this is what I can work on. This is what I can do.
Absolutely. And, I do have independent study classes too. So if that is something that you're interested in doing, independent study means, like, I like working in groups. I feel like groups really helps people to connect to that time frame a little bit more and allow the memories and connect to the memories a little deeper. But independent study, definitely, that is an option of courses that I provide as well. Again, the John Bradshaw Homecoming, amazing, amazing, amazing book. And it goes through every single stage right until your brain is fully developed. And the Bruce Lipton, if you really want to go deep and get the work started and done, I would recommend that. As for takeaways, if you see in your life that there is a repeated emotion and decision that you can't seem to get out of, and it's like you can see the cycle, but you can't seem to break out of it, this work is probably something that's going to benefit you.
Okay. That's a good start right there. So I'm definitely going to check out both these books, because they sound fascinating. Linda, where can we find you? Where can our listeners find you?
Well, I have a bunch of pages on Facebook, but the main ones that I operate from are The Awakened Being. That is a page that I started just recently. I think it's only been there a couple months now. And I have the Virtual Health Foods and Supplements page. And then I also have a video podcast. It's called Where's Your Focus podcast. And you can find me there. We do episodes every Wednesday. We're going to be tying up at the end of May for the summer, but we'll be starting back again in November.
Very cool. And listeners, we'll have all those links down in the show notes. Just head over to the website if you're not listening directly from the website, releasingtraumapodcast.com. Find Linda's show in either this week or in the previous episodes, and all her links and information will be there, as well as those two books that she mentioned by John Bradshaw and Bruce Lipton. So they'll be there easy for you to find if you want to check those out. Linda, thank you so much for coming on and talking to us today a little bit about our inner child. And I find it fascinating that we really need to start from the womb and work forward rather than just kind of diving in the middle. So that was kind of cool to learn today. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And I just want to throw in there too, just one last word about
Absolutely.
Inner peace is something that is our human right. And, these little things that happen to us in childhood can keep us from experiencing that and, just taking that step. And I know it can be overwhelming and it takes a lot of bravery to open up these Pandora boxes, but so worth it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you. Listeners, thank you for listening. As always, we'll talk to you next week on the show.